I was upset that Director Comey didn't coordinate that with us and acted unilaterally. Yes, I was.
Okay. Did Comey go rogue?
But you could use that term, yes.
Finally.
Okay, joining me now, House Intelligence Committee ranking Republican. He is Congressman Devin Nunes. Great to have you on, Congressman. Your reaction to that?
Well, there's a lot of finger pointing. That's what I would say. It's pretty clear that I thought Senator Graham did a nice job of explaining that on January 4th, the agents that were in charge of the Flynn investigation had decided that there was nothing more to do to investigate General Flynn. And remember, this was an exhaustive 6-month investigation that had begun in July of 2016. And then we know about the emails, the communications that went on the 4th, and then there's this White House meeting on the 5th. Joe Biden is there, and it's still unclear to me who on earth brought up the Logan Act and the idea that Sally Yates, the Deputy Attorney General, would be talking about the Logan Act. And even when Senator Graham pushed her on the question of whether or not if he, as a senator, calls Israel and says this is not in the best interest, this Obama policy is not in the best interest of the United States or of Israel, would he be violating the Logan Act? And essentially she said possibly. Now, look, this is a law that's never been used. Look, we can go on and on about this, Liz, but just another point that was brought up. Bruce Orr, her deputy, who is basically running like this shadow campaign between the Clinton campaign, his wife's working for Clinton, helping on the Steele dossier. He's meeting with all the Fusion GPS guys. He's running stuff to the State Department. The guy's still working there. Let's not forget that. And then, but Yates is oblivious to this. This is like the most oblivious Deputy Attorney General in U.S. history.
Yeah, that's the issue. Critics are saying Yates cannot be believed, given the timeline. Okay, let's back up. Flynn talks to the Russian ambassador in late 2016, advising don't do tit-for-tat retaliations against Obama's new sanctions on Russia. We need you, Russia, on ISIS. Obama wants to know, why didn't Russia retaliate against my sanctions? So administration officials under Obama unmasked General Flynn. Find out he's talking to the Russian ambassador. The FBI on January 4th wants to close the case in Flynn. Nothing there on Flynn. So can Yates really be believed when she testified that Obama's Oval Office meeting the next day, January 5th, was really just about, quote, getting information that they were going to share with General Flynn? Really? I mean, Joe Biden reportedly was talking about the Logan Act, using that against General Flynn. Obama pulls Yates and Comey aside and said, listen, even though I'm not supposed to be directing the investigation, put the right people on it. Make sure you have the right people on that Flynn investigation, the right people, meaning FBI agents like Peter Strzok, who then went after Flynn. So can Sally Yates really be believed here? And did Republicans really hold her feet to the fire?
Well, I think let's just take, can Yates be believed? Let's just talk about what's not believable. What's not believable is that she had no clue, she's totally oblivious, that the Democrats had paid for this dossier. She claims she read the FISA application. She signed the application. Look, this is a big deal. Opening up an investigation into the Trump campaign and going to a federal court and getting a FISA warrant, she had to know about Crossfire Hurricane, the investigation. Then in October, right before the election, they're going in to spy on a Trump campaign associate. This is a really big, big deal. And so for her to be kind of oblivious, oh, we didn't really know, didn't know who paid for it at the time. And then, on January 4th, the FBI, basically they want to wash their hands. The actual investigators want to wash their hands. They had to have known about this phone call with Kislyak. So who generates this whole idea of the Logan Act? Why do they keep this open? And look, what
right.
It
so
looks
here's
to me
a
like
question I want to ask this: Should Obama? Right. Should Obama and Biden be called in to testify? I know A.G. Barr said he's not going to do that because it certainly looks like Obama and Biden were deeper into this, according to government documents, than the media is reporting. I mean, I hear what you're saying. Sally Yates now says she's shocked by the Justice Department watchdog report showing FBI abuses of the FISA court, where it deceived the FISA court, misled the FISA court, didn't disclose they were using fully how they were using the Steele dossier, that the Democrats paid for it. The Hillary Clinton campaign helped fund it. Hillary Clinton's campaign was going to use the Steele opposition research on Trump to contest the 2016 election. And Stuart Evans at the Office of Intelligence of the Justice Department knew there were problems with the Democrats funding it. But somehow Sally Yates doesn't know any of this. Right. So that's the issue. How does Sally Yates really not know when she signed those FBI FISA wiretaps? But she's saying that Comey's going rogue. Why? The question to her was, how and why did you not know?
Yeah, and I think when you look at this, they clearly don't like Comey because Comey seemed to be, I think that's the right description. He did go rogue quite often. And look, he was going to be fired. Don't forget, Hillary Clinton was going to fire Comey if she had won. And probably in retrospect, Trump should have fired him right off the bat. But that wouldn't have been the only problem because you had Yates and this whole cabal that was involved in this January 5th meeting that allowed McCabe and company to okay this interview that General Flynn had at the beginning of the Trump administration. And look, let's not be fooled here. One of the biggest mistakes in all of this is that General Flynn should have never been fired. Now, look, I know going back in time, it's hard because nobody knows who's telling the truth, but yeah. President Trump at the time and the vice president should have known that something really smelled here. And, they knew that nobody was colluding with Russians.
Why was Obama and Biden, why were they having that Oval Office meeting on January 5th about General Flynn? Why? Why even have the meeting at all when the FBI was going to close the case? I want to get to this soundbite because Rod Rosenstein, who succeeded Sally Yates as, Deputy Acting Attorney General, he also testified he would not have approved those FISA wiretaps that the FBI got from the court. Let's watch this soundbite with Sally Yates here. Watch this.
Did you read the Horowitz report, Ms. Yates?
I did.
Were you shocked by it?
I certainly was shocked, yes.
Does it bother you that the FISA court rebuked the Department of Justice and the FBI regarding the Carter Page warrant application?
Senator, I believe that the Department of Justice and the FBI have a duty of candor with the FISA court.
Do you believe they fulfilled that duty?
No, I do not believe that they did.
Knowing then what you know now, would you sign that application?
Senator, I would never sign any document.
So I take that to be no, because that document was a fraud. Is that a fair statement? If you knew then what you know now, you wouldn't have signed it?
I wouldn't sign anything that I knew to contain errors or omissions.
Well, did that contain errors and omissions?
Yeah, and I would never knowingly sign a document.
Right.
Okay, so Congressman, you see still the runaround. I mean, I think people out there watching this and studying this say, Republicans keep saying they want to get to the bottom of this. Get to the bottom of this. Here's the issue. There was opposition research funded by Democrats that made its way into the FBI to spy on an opposition campaign. Period. Everybody agrees, don't have Russian meddling. Stop Russian meddling. Stop Russian interference. Stop that. But this is something else. This changed into something else that basically transgresses what Americans feel that they value about this country. It's about independence. It's about not being spied on by an opposition political party. And how did that happen where the Hillary Clinton campaign funds opposition research, it gets into the FBI, it's used to get FISA wiretaps meant for terrorists to spy on people like Carter Page? How does that happen?
I think you missed one thing in your assessment. What the FBI and Sally Yates and everybody was concerned about, supposedly the Trump campaign colluding with Russians, they were doing it. And the FBI knew that Steele had questionable sources and that likely this information could have been coming from the Russians themselves. And that's the problem that sums up all of this, that they accused the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, of doing exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. And it should be noted, Christopher Steele testified at a British court. He was paid to dig up this information on then candidate Trump in order for Hillary Clinton to contest the 2016 election in case she lost. Congressman Nunes, it's great to have you on. Thanks for your insights there. Come back soon.
Thanks.